One morning, Gordon was in the yard taking on a large supply of coal.
That's the third load of coal you've had today, Gordon, said James. Some might say you're being rather greedy.
I'm an important engine, replied Gordon. Important engines need plenty of coal, but I doubt if you would understand that, James. James snorted and went about his work. Later, Gordon was taking on water from a standpipe because the water tower was under repair. I wouldn't drink too much of that water if I were you, Gordon. It might give you boiler ache. Pah, said Gordon. What's this, educating Gordon Day? First James, now you, Duck. Big engines have big needs. Little engines are just annoying. Don't say I didn't warn you, laughed Duck. Later, Gordon steamed into the yard at the big station. That's what I need, exclaimed Gordon. There, emerging out of the sheds, were two shiny tenders. Now, if I had two tenders, said Gordon, I wouldn't need to stop so often, and I wouldn't have to listen to silly little engines. Those tenders belong to a visitor, replied his driver. Diesel sidled up alongside. Everyone knows that tenders are a mark of distinction, but I'm afraid that no amount of tenders will save you in the end. We Diesels are taking over, and we don't need tenders to make us important, not even one. Gordon was most upset. He was feeling just the same next day. I'm not happy. I know, said Duck. It's boiler ache. It's not boiler ache, protested Gordon. Of course it is, interrupted Henry. That water's bad. Have a good washout, then you'll feel a different engine. Your boiler must be full of sludge. Don't be vulgar, huffed Gordon. He backed down onto his train, hissing mournfully. Cheer up, Gordon, said Sir Topham Hatt. I can't, sir. Is it true what Diesel says, sir? What does he say? That Diesels are taking over. Don't worry, Gordon. That will never happen on my railway. One more thing, sir. Why did the visitor have two tenders? Because he lives on a railway with long distances between coaling depots. Gordon felt better. But Henry started complaining. He banged some cars angrily. I always work hard enough for two, he puffed. I deserve another tender. Duck whispered something to Donald. He was going to play a trick on Henry. Henry, he asked, would you like my tenders? Yours? What have you got to do with tenders? All right, said Duck. The deal's off. Would you like them, Donald? I wouldn't deprive you of the honor, replied Donald. It is a great honor, continued Duck thoughtfully, but I'm only a tank engine. Perhaps James might. I'm sorry I was rude, said Henry hastily. How many tenders have you, and when could I have them? I have 6, and you can have them this evening. 6 lovely tenders, chortled Henry. What a splendid sight I'll be. Henry was excited all day. Do you think it will be all right? He asked for the umpteenth time. Of course, said Duck. They're all ready now. The other engines waited where they could each get a good view. But Henry wasn't a splendid sight at all. His 6 tenders were very old, dirty, and filled with boiler sludge. Had a good washout, Henry, called a voice. That's right. You'll feel a different engine now. Henry was not sure, but he thought the voice belonged to Gordon.
Toby and Henrietta are enjoying their new job on the island of Sodor, but they do look old-fashioned and need new paint. James was very rude whenever he saw them. Ugh, what dirty objects, he would say. At last, Toby lost patience. James, he asked, why are you red? I am a splendid engine, answered James. Ready for anything. You never see my paint dirty. Oh, said Toby innocently, that's why you once needed bootlaces, to be ready, I suppose. James went redder than ever and snorted off. It was such an insult to be reminded of the time a bootlace had been used to mend a hole in his coaches. At the end of the line, James left his coaches and got ready for his next train. It was a slow goods, stopping at every station to pick up and set down trucks. James hated slow goods trains. Dirty trucks from dirty sidings. Blech! Starting with only a few, he picked up more and more trucks at each station, till he had a long train. At first, the trucks behaved well, but James bumped them so crossly that they were determined to pay him back. Presently, they approached the top of Gordon's Hill. Heavy goods trains halt here to pin down their brakes. James had had an accident with trucks before and should have remembered this. Wait, James, wait, said the driver, but James wouldn't wait. He was too busy thinking what he would say to Toby when they next met. The truck's chance had come. Hurrah, hurrah, they laughed, and banging their buffers, they pushed him down the hill. On, yelled the trucks. I've got to stop! I've got to stop! Groaned James. Through the station they thundered. Disaster lay ahead. Something sticky splashed all over James. He had run into 2 tar wagons and was black from smoke box to cab. He was more dirty than hurt, but the tar wagons and some trucks were all to pieces. Toby and Percy were sent to help and came as quickly as they could. Look here, Percy, exclaimed Toby. Whatever is that dirty object? That's James, didn't you know? It's James's shape, said Toby. But James is a splendid red engine, and you never see his paint dirty. James pretended he hadn't heard. Toby and Percy cleared away the unhurt trucks and helped James home. The fat controller met them. Well done, Percy and Toby. He turned to James. Fancy letting your trucks run away. I am surprised. You're not fit to be seen. You must be cleaned at once. Toby shall have a new coat of paint. Please, sir, can Henrietta have one too, said Toby. Certainly, Toby. Oh, thank you, sir. She will be pleased. All James could do was watch Toby as he ran off happily with the news.
Lots of people travel to the big station at the end of the line. Engines from the other railway sometimes pull their trains. Gordon was talking one day to one of these. I remember going to London. Do you know the place? The station's called King's Cross. King's Cross, snorted the engine. London's Euston. Everybody knows that. Rubbish, said Duck. London's Paddington. I know. I work there. They were still arguing when the other engine went away. Stupid thing, said Gordon crossly. I've no patience. Stupid yourself, said Duck. London's Paddington. Do you hear? Stop arguing, James broke in. You make me tired. You both agreed about something anyway. What's that? London's not Euston, laughed James. Gordon rolled away, still grumbling. I'm sure it's King's Cross. One day he pulled the express to the station as usual. His fireman uncoupled the coaches and he ran onto his siding to wait till it was time to go home. The coaches waited and waited at the platform, but their engine didn't come. A porter ran across and spoke to Gordon's driver. The inspector's on the platform. He wants to see you. He came back in a few minutes looking excited. Hello, said the fireman. What's happened? The engine for the express turned over when it was coming out of the yard. Nothing else can come in or out. They want us to take the train to London. I said we would if the Fat Controller agreed, and he said we could do it. How's that? Fine, said the fireman. We'll show them what the Fat Controller's engines can do. Come on, said Gordon. Let's go. He rolled quickly over the crossings and backed onto the train. It was only a few minutes before the guard blew his whistle, but Gordon thought it was ages. Gordon found that London was a long way away. Come on, he called to the coaches. Come on, come on, come on. We're going to town, we're going to town, sang the coaches slowly at first, then faster and faster. Gordon had to work harder than ever before. Never mind, he puffed. I like a good long run to stretch my wheels. But all the same, he was glad when London came in sight. The Fat Controller came into his office next morning. He looked at the letters on his desk. One had a London postmark. I wonder how Gordon's getting on, he said. The station master knocked and came in. Excuse me, sir, have you seen the news? Not yet. Why? The Fat Controller took the newspaper. Good gracious me, he said. There's Gordon. Headlines too. Famous engine at London Station. Please call to control crowds. The Fat Controller read on, absorbed. Gordon returned next day. The Fat Controller spoke to his driver and fireman. I see you had a good welcome in London. We certainly did, sir. We signed autographs till our arms ached, and Gordon had his photograph taken from so many directions at once that he didn't know which way to look. Good, smiled the Fat Controller. I expect he enjoyed himself, didn't you, Gordon? No, sir, I didn't. Why ever not? London's all wrong, answered Gordon sadly. They've changed it. It isn't King's Cross anymore. It's St. Pancras.
Sodor was buzzing with activity in the autumn period. While regular services carried out, there was an ever-increasing demand for passenger services on all of the lines that snaked around the island. This didn't cease the eager anticipation for visitors from the mainland to see the engines in action. The Fat Controller was making plans for a series of special chartered trains to take place across the railway so that enthusiasts could take in all aspects of the island. The big engines were wondering that afternoon who would be responsible to pull the trains.
The responsibility of carrying such a momentous train would have to be blessed to a big engine not unlike myself,
put in Gordon. I think you've had a fair share of important trains over the year, Gordon. I've longed for the experience to do so myself. After all, I was the initial choice to pull the royal train when Her Majesty came here, but if it wasn't for that painter, the nerve, I tell you. It may be within your right, Henry, but both of you haven't considered one important thing. The two big engines looked at James, absent-mindedly.
And what might that be, little James?
The charter trains are going to showcase on all aspects of the island, meaning whoever gets to port will have to go down branch lines. I was under the impression you thought branch lines were vulgar, Gordon.
Oh, just you wait.
Besides, both of you are much too big to travel on the likes of Thomas's or Duck's branch line. I think that takes both of you out of the equation and gives me a greater likelihood. The visitors will want a splendid engine as well, may I add. Both Henry and Gordon seethed with envy at the thought that they may not be chosen and James could have one up on them. Before either of them could retort back, James had puffed out to the station jauntily. Just look at him. This is the circus train all over again.
You're right.
The fat controller emerged from his office to address Gordon and Henry.
I've had news from one of the mainland railway controllers about the plans for the charter service. The engine who'll be taking the trains is due to arrive tomorrow morning.
Gordon and Henry blinked, a little disappointed, but somewhat relieved that the possibility of James pulling the train was no longer possible. It was at this moment a wicked idea popped into Gordon's firebox.
So, I couldn't help to wonder, but do we know who this engine will be? Surely they're a grand engine with some experience.
Oh, they definitely are. Very versed in charter services.
Would you happen to know what colour they might be?
Oh, I'm not too sure. Why would you want to know such specific details? They're a privately owned locomotive from the Shirley Valley Railway. From what I know after their working life, they were painted red. Gordon's eyes lit up with bemusement. As he and Henry departed, Henry looked over to Gordon to understand what may be going on. Gordon had a plan to pay James back for his churlish behaviour. As the engines congregated for the evening, Gordon and Henry decided this was the perfect opportunity to get James back.
Say, Henry, did you hear the news?
What?
I said, did you hear the news?
Oh yes, that news.
Word on the rails is that the Fat Controller has decided who's going to pull the train.
Oh really?
Well, I only know two things about the lucky engine. From what I heard, he's from the mainland.
The mainland? Oh, how very swanky. It was Thomas's turn to put in. I wonder if it will be an old friend. It will be good to see Stepney or Wilbert again.
Well, that would be nice, dear Thomas. I'm afraid that strays far from the truth. Apparently the engine is a Shirley class.
A Shirley class? Put in Percy. I've never heard of such an engine before. You haven't heard of a Shirley class? Oh, Percy, you have much to learn. They have a large wheel configuration, and...
He stands taller than Murdoch and longer than Spencer.
My goodness me, that sounds like a big engine, said Thomas. Oh, but Thomas, you're missing the greatest detail. It may be large and sleek, but it's very lightweight. Oh, and it's good for travelling on branch lines. It was at this moment that James started to pay attention to the conversation.
What's special about this engine, concluded Gordon, is that they are red.
James's face went white with realization of shock and horror.
Surely the Fat Controller wouldn't allow such an engine to come.
Oh, it's confirmed. From what I've heard, the engine is arriving tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Rather worried for his own welfare and reputation, James ushered himself into the sheds without another word, leaving Gordon and Henry quietly sniggering. Percy, however, was rather puzzled. Then Edward explained. I think Gordon and Henry might be pulling James's wheels, he said. The next morning, James made sure he got to work in good time. He was determined to show the Fat Controller that a mainland engine, let alone another red engine, was not necessary to pull the charter services. He worried that the new engine would upstage him and possibly take his place as the token splendid red engine. Say, Rosie, who's this train for? This train? Henry's due to take it at the end of the line this morning. James thought this could be his great opportunity to show the Fat Controller he was strong and capable after all. I'll be taking these trucks. The Fat Controller asked me to.
James backed up to the long train of troublesome trucks with a bump. The trucks hissed and sniggered. You trucks ought to be on your best behavior, you hear? I won't be putting up with your nonsense today. Where's Henry? He usually pulls our train. Henry's not here today. I will pull you. Not with that attitude. Enough! Infernal cheek, the lot of you. I need to show the Fat Controller that I'm more capable of pulling the charter train. James puffed slowly out of the shunting yard onto the main line. We'll show him a thing or two, won't we, gang? Stow it! That's no way to speak. We'll pay him out. We'll pay him out! We'll pay him out! James' thoughts got the better of him as he dwelled more and more on the topic of the mysterious Remakes engine. He was so carried away that he disregarded an amber signal as he sped past a signal box. James thundered past the signal box. The signalman looked up from sleeping and angrily threw his fist at James. I'll show him! I'll show him! Unbeknownst to James, the line ahead was occupied. Boko was waiting at the next signal with a long line of coal trucks that were due for naphtha. James's truck saw the opportunity and took it. A quick-thinking shunter pulled the track point lever, diverting James into a siding.
James!
Cried Boko. And then there was trouble. James crashed through the buffers and onto the ground as the trucks behind him laughed chaotically. He sighed as he realized the mess that he got himself into. Goodness gracious me, James. I don't know when you'll learn. These trucks were especially given to Henry because he knows how to control them.
I'm sorry, sir.
I shouldn't have taken them. I wanted to show that I could be more impressive than this mainland engine that you were going to get to upstage me. Upstage you? Whatever do you mean, James? I heard the engine was a red Cherney class. Gordon said so. James, the engine comes from the Cherney Valley Railway. I have no idea what Gordon is on about. Aha, that sounds like her now.
Hello, sir. It's lovely to be here.
Ah, Katie, how wonderful to finally meet you. I trust your journey treated you fairly.
Yes, sir. I've longed for a good run, so the distance between my railway and yours worked out exceptionally well. And I'm looking forward to the chartered services too.
Well, James, maybe you should understand that size isn't everything, and that perhaps you should take the words of others with a grain of salt. Katie here is perfect for our charter services. She is very capable of traveling not only across the main line, but on branch lines too. Being a tank engine proves very advantageous for this. He paused. What I think you have exemplified this morning, James, is that you have a lot to learn about trucks and how to control them still. Perhaps it's worth your time maybe stepping back from pulling passenger trains until you've brought yourself back up to speed.
James looked sadly down at his buffers. He thought about what Gordon had said, and he'd wondered whether he would ever be allowed to pull passengers again.
Gordon is a very proud steam engine. He's the fastest engine on the island of Sodor. He loves speeding along his line with the wind blowing across his funnel. You've broken the record again, said his driver. I'm the fastest, boasted Gordon. But not all the engines were impressed. Speed isn't everything, said James smugly. But being reliable and useful is, said Thomas. You slow engines will never understand, snorted Gordon, because you'll never go as fast as me. The Fat Controller arrived with news of a special for Thomas. I want you to collect a jet engine and take it to the airfield. What's a jet engine? Asked Percy. A jet engine goes forward by pushing hot air out of its back, the Fat Controller said. Just like when you blow up a balloon and let it go, added Thomas. It's very fast. Thomas likes making special deliveries for the Fat Controller. It makes him feel special. But secretly, he wished he could go as fast as Gordon. Just once. Thomas arrived at the docks excited to see the jet engine. It was shiny and modern, and Thomas had never seen anything like it. He just couldn't wait to start his journey, but Cranky was taking his time. Hurry up, huffed Thomas. This is a special. Cranky did not like being told what to do, especially by an engine. He became so cranky that he was careless with his hook. His hook knocked the switch, and the switch started the jet engine, and the engine began to whine. The whine got louder and louder and louder. Uh-oh, said Cranky. Before he could say anything else, the jet engine was rocketing Thomas up the track. Oh, said Thomas. The driver tried to put on the brakes, but Thomas couldn't stop. Oh, boy! The station master called ahead. Clear the lines, it's a runaway train! Signals were changed and points were switched. Thomas had never been so excited. Thomas flew by James and rocketed past Henry and raced by Percy. They were amazed. Bertie was excited when he saw Thomas flying down the track. Want a race, Thomas? Beeped Bertie. Never mind. No one had ever seen an engine go so fast. Gordon had no idea that Thomas was racing along the main line. I am the fastest, said Gordon proudly. Hi, Gordon. Bye, Gordon. Gordon could not believe what he had seen. At last, the jet engine ran out of fuel, and Thomas was back under his own power. He steamed gently back into Knapford Station. Sorry for overtaking you back there, Gordon. Overtake me? I didn't notice, Gordon huffed. You didn't notice the fastest engine on the island, said Henry. Yes, I am the fastest, puffed Thomas. Percy felt a little sorry for Gordon. Gordon doesn't have to go as fast as a jet engine. He's a steam engine. But he's still full of hot air, whistled James, and Gordon wheeshed away.
Thomas the Tank Engine is very proud of his branch line. He thinks it's the most important part of the whole railway. His two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, agree with him. Annie can only take passengers, but Clarabelle can take passengers, luggage, and the guard. They are both old and need new paint, but Thomas loves them very much. As they run backwards and forwards along the line, they sing songs to each other. When Thomas starts from a station, he sings, "Oh, come along, we're rather late. Oh, come along, we're rather late." And the coaches sing, "We're coming along, we're coming along." They don't mind what Thomas says to them, because they know he is trying to please the Fat Controller. And they know, too, that if Thomas is cross, he's not cross with them. One day they had to wait for Henry's train, which made Thomas very cross. How can I run my line properly if Henry is always late? He doesn't realize that the Fat Controller depends on me. Thomas whistled impatiently. He wanted to leave, but he had to wait for Henry's passengers. At last, Henry came. Where have you been, lazybones? Asked Thomas. Oh dear, my system is out of order. No one understands my case. You don't know what I suffer, moaned Henry. Rubbish, said Thomas. You're too fat. You need exercise. The guard blew his whistle and Thomas started so quickly that he left him behind. The guard waved his red flag to stop Thomas, but he was well on his way, steaming out of the station. Come along, puffed Thomas. But Clarabelle didn't want to come. I've lost my nice guard. I've lost my nice guard, she sobbed. Annie tried to tell Thomas what had happened. We haven't a guard. We haven't a guard. But he was hurrying and wouldn't listen. Annie and Clarabelle tried to put on their brakes, but they couldn't without the guard. Where is our guard? Where is our guard? They cried. But Thomas didn't stop till they came to a signal. Bother that signal, said Thomas. What's the matter? I don't know, said his driver. The guard will tell us in a minute. They waited and waited, but the guard didn't come. Peep, 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 peep. Where is the guard? Whistled Thomas. We've left him behind, sobbed Annie and Clarabelle together. Everyone looked. And there was the guard running as fast as he could along the line, with his flags in one hand and his whistle in the other. He was very hot, so he had a drink, then told them all about it. I'm very sorry, Mr. Guard, said Thomas. It wasn't your fault, Thomas, he replied. Look, the signal is down. We can go. Let's make up for lost time. Annie and Clarabelle were so pleased to have their guard again that they sang, as fast as you like, to Thomas all the way. They reached the end of the line quicker than ever before. In summer, the gangers cut the long grass on the line side, raking it into heaps to dry in the sun. At this time of year, Percy stops where they have been cutting. The men load up his empty wagons and he pulls them to the station. Toby then takes them to the hills for the farmers to feed their stock. Whee! Percy gave a ghostly whistle. Don't be frightened, Thomas, he laughed. It's only me. Your ugly fizz is enough to frighten anyone, said Thomas. You're like... ugly indeed. I'm a green caterpillar with red stripes, continued Thomas firmly. You crawl like one too. I don't. Who's been late every afternoon this week? It's the hay. I can't help that, said Thomas. Time's time, and the Fat Controller relies on me to keep it. I can't if you crawl in the hay till all hours. Green caterpillar indeed, fumed Percy. He set off to collect some hay to take to the harbour. Everyone says I'm handsome, or at least nearly everyone. Anyway, my curves are better than Thomas's corners. Thomas says I'm always late, he grumbled. I'm never late, or at least only a few minutes. What's that to Thomas? He can always catch up time further on. All the same, he and his driver decided to start home early. Then came trouble. A crate of treacle was upset all over Percy. Percy was cross. He was still sticky when he puffed away. The wind was blowing fiercely. "Look at that!" exclaimed the driver. The wind caught the piled hay, tossing it up and over the track. The lion climbed here. "Take a run at it, Percy," his driver advised. Percy gathered speed, but the hay made the rails slippery, and his wheels wouldn't grip. Time after time he stalled with spinning wheels and had to wait till the line ahead was cleared before he could start again. Everyone was waiting. Thomas seethed impatiently. 10 minutes late. I warned him. Passengers will complain, and the fat controller. Then they all saw Percy. They laughed and shouted. "Sorry I'm late," Percy panted. "Look what's crawled out of the hay," teased Thomas. "What's wrong?" asked Percy. "Talk about hairy caterpillars," puffed Thomas. "It's worth being late to have seen you." When Percy got home, his driver showed him what he looked like in a mirror. "Bust my buffers! No wonder they all laughed. I'm just like a woolly bear. Please clean me before Toby comes." But it was no good. Thomas told Toby all about it. Instead of talking about sensible things like playing ghosts, Thomas and Toby made jokes about woolly bear caterpillars and other creatures which crawl about in hay. They laughed a lot, but Percy thought they were really being very silly indeed.
Duck, the Great Western engine, worked hard in the yard at the big station. Sometimes he pulled coaches. Sometimes he pushed trucks. But whatever the work, Duck got the job done without fuss. One day, Duck was resting in the shed when the fat controller arrived. "Your work in the yard has been good. Would you like to have a branch line for your own?" "Oh, yes, please, sir," replied Duck. So Duck took charge of his new branch line. The responsibility delighted him. The line runs along the coast by sandy beaches till it meets a port where big ships come in. Duck enjoyed exploring every curve and corner of the line. Sea breezes swirled his smoke high into the air, and his green paint glistened in the sunlight. "This is just like being on holiday," he puffed. "Well, you know what they say," laughed his driver. "A change is as good as a rest." Soon Duck was busier than ever. The fat controller was building a new station at the port, and Duck pushed the trucks wherever they were needed. Bertie looked after Duck's passengers, and the other engines helped too, but the work took a long time. Noise and dust filled the air. "Don't worry," whistled Toby. "The station's nearly finished." "And on time too," said Duck, thankfully. Duck felt his responsibility deeply, and talked endlessly about it. You don't understand, Donald, how much the Fat Controller relies on me. "Oh, aye," muttered Donald sleepily. "I'm Great Western, and I quack, quack, quack." "What?" "Ye heard? Quack, quack you go. Sounds like you'd an egg laid. Now wheesht and let an engine sleep." "Quack yourself," said Doc indignantly. Later, he spoke to his driver. "Donald says I quack as if I'd laid an egg." "Quack, do you?" pondered his fireman. He whispered something to Duck and his driver. They were going to play a joke on Donald and pay him back for teasing Duck. The engines were busy for the rest of the day and nothing more was said. Not even a quack. But when at last Donald was asleep, Duck's driver and fireman popped something into his water tank. Next morning, when Donald stopped for water, he found that he had an unexpected passenger aboard. A small white duckling popped out of his water tank. "Nay, who's behind this?" laughed Donald. The duckling was tame. She shared the fireman's sandwiches and rolled in the tender. The other engines enjoyed teasing Donald about her. Presently, she grew tired of travelling and hopped off at a station, and there she stayed. That night, Donald's driver and fireman got busy, and in the morning, when Duck's crew arrived, they laughed and laughed. "Look, Duck! Look what's under your bunker! It's a nest box with an egg in it!" Donald opened a sleepy eye. Will. You must have laid it in the night, Duck, all unbeknownst." Then Duck laughed too. "You win, Donald. It'd take a clever engine to get the better of you." There's a pond near the duckling station. Here she swims and welcomes the trains as they pass by. The station master calls her Dilly. To everyone else, she is always Donald's duck.
Thomas the Tank Engine has worked his branch line for many years and knows it very well. "You know just where to stop, Thomas," laughed his driver. "You could almost manage it without me." Thomas had become conceited. He didn't realize his driver was joking. Later, he boasted to the others. "Driver says I don't need him now." "Don't be so daft," snorted Percy. "I'd never go without my driver," said Toby earnestly. "I'd be frightened." "Puh!" boasted Thomas. "I'm not scared. You'd never dare." "I would then. You'll see." The next morning, the firelighter came. Thomas drowsed comfortably as the warmth spread through his boiler. Percy and Toby were still asleep. Thomas suddenly remembered. "Silly stick in the muds," he chuckled. "I'll show them. Driver said I could manage without him. I'll just go out and then I'll stop and wheesh! That'll make them jump." Thomas thought he was being clever, but really he was only moving because a careless cleaner had meddled with his controls. He soon found his mistake. He tried to wheesh, but he couldn't. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. He just kept rolling along. He didn't dare look at what was coming next. There was the station master's house. The station master was about to have breakfast. "Horrors!" cried Thomas and shut his eyes. The house rocked, broken glass tinkled, plaster was everywhere. Thomas had collected a bush on his travels. He peered into the room through its leaves. He couldn't speak. The station master was furious. His wife picked up her plate. "You miserable engine," she scolded. "Just look what you've done to our breakfast. Now I shall have to cook some more." She banged the door. More plaster fell. This time it fell on Thomas. Thomas felt depressed. Workmen propped up the house with strong poles and laid rails through the garden. Then, the Scottish twin engines Donald and Douglas arrived. "Dinna fash yourself, Thomas. We'll soon have you back on the rails," they laughed. Donald and Douglas, puffing hard, managed to haul Thomas back to safety. Bits of fencing, the bush, and a broken window frame festooned his front, which was badly twisted. The twins laughed and left him. Thomas was in disgrace. There was worse to come. "You're in a lot of trouble, Thomas." "I know, sir. I'm sorry, sir." Thomas's voice was muffled behind his bush. "You must go to the works and have your front mended. It will be a long job." "Yes, sir." "Meanwhile, a diesel rail car will do your work." A diesel, sir?" Thomas spluttered. "Yes, Thomas. Diesels always stay in their sheds till they are wanted. Diesels never gallivant off to breakfast in station masters' houses."
James is a mixed traffic engine. He can pull both trucks and coaches. He's proud of his smart red paint, and so is his driver. Everyone says you brighten up their day, James. One morning, James whistled loudly at the other engines. "Look at me! I am the smartest, most useful engine on the line." "Rubbish," replied Thomas. "We're all useful. The Fat Controller says so, and he's Sir Topham Hatt, head of the whole railway." "You know what, James?" added Percy. "What?" replied James. "You're getting all puffed up." James huffed away. Later, he was still boasting. "I'm the pride of the line." "I saw you pulling trucks today. You're only a goods engine," snorted Gordon. James was furious. "I pull coaches too." "Not as much as I do," grunted Gordon. "The Fat Controller has plans for me." James was only making this up, but Gordon believed him. "What plans?" Wait and see." "Oh dear," thought James. "Now what'll I do?" Thomas was shunting shining new coaches. "Good morning, James." "Are those coaches for me?" asked James hopefully. "No, these are for Gordon's Express. I'll fetch your trucks next." But James was going to play a trick on the other engines. "Actually, Thomas, I'm taking the coaches. The Fat Controller asked me to tell you." "What about the trucks?" Give them to Gordon." "Come on, Thomas," said his driver. "Orders are orders." So when James's driver returned, James was coupled to the coaches and he puffed away. Thomas returned with the trucks. A few minutes later, Gordon arrived. "Where's the express?" Thomas told him about James, and so here are your trucks. Gordon was very cross, and so was his driver. "Wait till the Fat Controller hears about this." Meanwhile, James was enjoying himself enormously. "What a clever plan, what a clever plan," he chuffed. Then he saw the Fat Controller. "Some jokes are funny, but not this one, James. You have caused confusion." "Yes, sir," said James. "You will stay in your shed until you are wanted." The other engines teased James. "I wonder who'll be pulling the express today," said Gordon. "I expect it'll be you," replied Henry. "James is stuck in the shed for being silly." James felt sad. Next morning he went back to work. "Hello," whistled Thomas. "Good to see you out and about again." "I'm sorry I tricked you," said James. "Are these my trucks?" "Yes," replied Thomas kindly. "They are pleased to have you back." James puffed into the harbour with his goods train of trucks. He bustled about all day, pushing and pulling them into place. "Time to go home now, James," said his driver at last. "No trucks or passengers, just we two." But his driver was wrong. "Excuse me," called a man. "I have a meeting with Sir Topham Hatt, and I mustn't be late. May I ride back with you?" "Of course," replied James's driver. Then he whispered to James, "This gentleman is a railway inspector." James was most impressed. He steamed along the line as smoothly and as quickly as he could. The Fat Controller was waiting, and the railway inspector greeted him warmly. "This clever engine gave me a splendid ride. You must be proud of him." "Yes, indeed. James, once again, you are a really useful engine."
"I'm not happy," complained Gordon. "Your firebox is out of order," said James. "No wonder after all that coal you had yesterday." "Hard work brings good appetite," snapped Gordon. "You wouldn't understand." "I know," put in Duck, brightly. "It's boiler ache. I warned you about that standpipe on the other railway, but you drank gallons." "It's not boiler ache," protested Gordon. Of course it is," said Henry. "That water's bad. It furs up your tubes. Your boiler must be full of sludge. Have a good washout, then you'll feel a different engine." "Don't be vulgar," said Gordon huffily. Gordon backed down on his train, hissing mournfully. "Cheer up, Gordon," said the Fat Controller. "I can't, sir. The others say I've got boiler ache, but I haven't, sir. I keep thinking about the dreadful state of the world, sir. Is it true, sir, what the diesels say?" "What do they say?" "They boast that they've abolished steam, sir." "Yes, Gordon, it is true." "What, sir? All my Doncaster brothers draw on the same time as me?" "All gone, except one." The guard's whistle blew, and Gordon puffed sadly away. "Poor old Gordon," said the Fat Controller. If only we could... Yes, I'll ask his owner at once." He hurried away. Arrangements took time, but one evening, Gordon's driver ran back, excited. "Wake up, Gordon. The Fat Controller's giving you a surprise. Look." Gordon could hardly believe it. Backing towards him were two massive green tenders, and their engine's shape was very much like his own. "It's Flying Scotsman," he gasped. "The Fat Controllers brought him to see me. Oh, thank you, sir." Gordon's toot of joy was drowned by the Flying Scotsman's as he drew happily alongside. Next day, the two engines were photographed side by side. "You've changed a lot," smiled the Flying Scotsman. "I had a rebuild at Crewe. They didn't do a proper Doncaster job, of course, but it serves. I had a rebuild too, and it looked hideous. But my owner said I was an extra special engine, and made them give me back my proper shape. Is that why you have two tenders, being special? No, you'd hardly believe it, Gordon, but over there, they've hardly any coal and water. But surely every proper railway..." "Exactly. You are lucky, Gordon, to have a controller who knows how to run railways." Everyone got on well with Flying Scotsman, except Henry. Henry was jealous. "Tenders are a mark of distinction," he complained. "Everybody knows that. Why's he got two?" "He's famous," explained Duck and Donald. It was the second to go 100 miles an hour. Besides, the other railway has no coal and water. Puh, sniffed Henry. I can't believe that. I never boast, he continued, but I always work hard enough for two. I deserve another tender for that. Duck whispered something to Donald. Henry, asked Duck innocently, would you like my tenders? Yours, exclaimed Henry. What have you got to do with tenders? All right, said Duck, the deal's off. Would you like them, Donald? I wouldn't deprive you of the honor. It is a great honor, said Duck thoughtfully, but I'm only a tank engine, so I don't really understand tenders. Perhaps James might. I'm sorry I was rude, said Henry hastily. How many tenders have you, and when can I have them? 6, and you can have them this evening. 6 lovely tenders, chortled Henry. What a splendid sight I'll be. That'll show the others the sort of engine I am. Henry was excited. You think it'll be all right? He asked for the umpteenth time. Of course, said Duck. Just go where I told you, and they'll all be ready. Meanwhile, word had gone round, and the others waited where they could get a good view. Henry was cheered to the echo when he came, but it wasn't a splendid sight. He had 6 tenders, true, but they were very old and very dirty. They were all filled with boiler sludge. Had a good washout, Henry? Called a voice. That's right. You'll feel a different engine now. Henry was not sure, but he thought the voice was Gordon's. The 2 diesels surveyed the shed. It's time, 7101, said one, that we took this railway over. Shh, 199, it's their railway after all. Not for long, persisted 199. Our controller says steam engines spoil our image. Of course we do, snapped Duck. We show what frauds you are. Call yourselves engines? If anything happens, you care nothing for your train. You just moan for a fitter. We bring it home, if only on 1 cylinder. Nothing, boasted 199, ever happens to us. We are reliable. Vulgar noises greeted this. How rude, said 199. You asked for it, growled 7101. Now shut up. Next day, Henry was rolling home tender first. I'm a failed engine, he moaned. Lost my regulator. Driver says it's jammed wide open, and he can't mend it till I'm cool. However, he went on, I've got steam, and driver can use my reverser. But it would happen after Duck fooled me with those tenders. Now they'll laugh at me again. He reached the signal box and stopped, whistling for a road. Opposite the box, on the up line, stood Diesel 199 with a train of oil tankers. Worse and worse, thought Henry. Now old Reliable will laugh at me too. The signalman came out. For pity's sake, take the spam can away. It's failed. The Limited is behind, and all he does is wail for his fitter. Spam can? Fumed 199. I'm... Stow it, snapped the signalman, or I'll take my tin opener to you. Now then. 199 subsided at this dreadful threat, and Henry pulled the train out of the way. The diesel didn't help, he just sulked. Henry gave a chuckle. Look, Spam Can, he said, there's your little pal. The diesel said nothing. He hoped 7101 hadn't noticed. He hadn't noticed. He had troubles of his own. He was cross with his coaches. They seemed to be getting heavier. He roared at them, but it did no good. Engines have a pump called an ejector, which draws air out of the train's brake pipes to keep the brakes off. If it fails, air leaks in and the brakes come on, gently at first, then harder and harder. 7101's ejector had failed. Well, do you hear what Signalman said? I thought they'd be laughing at me, chuckled Henry. Now the joke's on them. Moving 2 dead diesels on their trains, said his driver thoughtfully. That's no joke for a failed engine. Think you can do it? I'll have a good try, said Henry with spirit. Anyway, 7101's better than old Spam Can. He did try and shut him up last night. Come on then, said his driver. We mustn't keep the passengers waiting. Get moving, you! Henry pulled the sulky diesel into motion and started the rescue. Henry gently buffered up to the express. While the 2 drivers talked, his fireman joined his front brake pipe to the coaches. "It's better than we thought, Henry," said his driver. "The diesel can pull if we keep the brakes off, so the only weight we'll have is Spam Can's goods." "Whoosh," said Henry. "That's a mercy." He was by now, feeling rather puffed. "Poop, poop, poop, poop. Are you ready?" tooted 7101. "Beep, beep, beep, beep." "Yes, I am," whistled Henry. So was 7101 growling in front, and Henry gamely puffing in the middle. The long cavalcade set out for the next big station. Donald and Flying Scotsman were waiting. They cheered as Henry puffed past. He braked the coaches thankfully. Spam Can and the Tinkers trailed far behind. The passengers buzzed out like angry bees, but the Fat Controller told them about Henry, so they forgot to be cross and thanked Henry instead. They called him an enterprising engine and took his photograph. They were thrilled too when Flying Scotsman backed down on their train. If the guard hadn't tactfully shooed them to their coaches, the train would have started later than ever. Donald took the goods. "Return 199 to the other railway," ordered the Fat Controller. "I'll write my views later." Henry and 7101 went away together. "I'm sorry about last night," ventured the Diesel. "That's all right. You did shut old Reliable up." "And," said the Diesel ruefully, "made a fool of myself today, too." "Rubbish. A failed ejector might happen to anyone. I'd lost my regulator." "You? Failed?" exclaimed the Diesel, and yet... His voice trailed away in admiration. "Well," said Henry, "emergency, you know. Trains must get through." 7101 said no more. He had a lot to think about. Douglas had taken the midnight goods to a station on the other railway. He was shunting, ready for his return journey, when he heard a faint "That sounds like an engine," he thought. The hiss came again. This time it sounded almost despairing. "Who's there?" he asked. A whisper came. "Are you a Fat Controller's engine?" "I am proud of it." "Thank goodness. I'm Oliver. We're escaping to your railway, but we've run out of coal and I've got no more steam." "Is it from scrap you're escaping?" "Yes." "Them's glad I'll be to help you, but we must work fast." Both crews joined in. They took off Oliver's side rods, wrote out transit labels, and chalked scrap everywhere they could. Douglas marshaled Oliver in front of his train. "No time to turn round," he panted. "I must run tender first." "Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo," yelled a passing Diesel. "A steamer's escaping." Douglas puffed firmly on. "Take no notice," he counseled. But they were stopped before they could clear the station throat. The foreman's lamp shone on Oliver. "Aha!" he exclaimed. "A Western engine." His light flickered further back. "A Western auto coach and a goods brake, too. You can't take these." "Can we no?" said Douglas's driver. "They're all for us. See for yourself." Douglas's guard showed him the labels and papers. Oliver's crew, hiding in the coach, hardly dared to breathe. "Seems in order," said the foreman grudgingly, "but it's strange." "Sure, and it is," began the guard, "but I could tell you stranger." "So could I," interrupted the foreman. "Right away, guard." "A near thing," puffed Douglas with relief. "We've had worse," smiled Oliver. "We ran at night. Friendly signalmen would pass up from box to box when no trains were about. We got on well till Control heard about a mystery train. Then they tried to hunt us down." "What did you do?" "A signalman let us hide in an old quarry branch. Driver, fireman, and guard blocked the cutting with rubbish and levered one of the approach rails away. We stayed there for days, with Diesels baying and growling like hounds outside. I was very frightened then." "Small blame to you," said Douglas feelingly. Presently, they rumbled over the bridge and onto the Fat Controller's railway. We're home! They can't catch you now. Tell Isabel and Toad, please. Douglas called out the news and heard a joyful ding-a-ling. He was surprised. Oliver chuckled. That's Isabel, he said. There's a bell on her, you see. She's clever. When we go out together, I pull one way and push the other. When I pull, I can see ahead. When I push, I can't, so Isabel keeps a good lookout and rings her bell to talk to me. You didn't say. Douglas was impressed. About this Toad, he continued. Is he? Hod your weesht, said his driver. Yon still works. We must slip unbeknownst and find a place for Oliver. Douglas tried hard to be quiet, but the night foreman heard them and had to be told their secret. I know just the place, he said, and showed them an empty siding nicely hidden away. Oliver said goodbye and thank you, and Douglas puffed away. Yon's an enterprising engine, he thought. I went away here with Donald, but I had been feared to do it on my own. Douglas arrived back in time to see Flying Scotsman take his enthusiasts home. The Fat Controller said they'd all been honored and thanked Flying Scotsman and his owner for their help. Please tell everyone, he went on, that whatever happens elsewhere, Steam will still be at work here. We shall be glad to welcome all who want to see and travel behind real engines. This announcement was greeted with cheers, and Flying Scotsman departed to the strains of Will You No Come Back Again? Led by, as one might expect, by Donald and Douglas. At last Douglas had to tell his news. They were all excited about it and agreed that something must be done for Oliver. I'm feared, said Donald. Some murdering diesel may creep in and leave him there alone, lacking steam to even whistle for help. You're right, said James. He won't be safe till the Fat Controller knows. Douglas should tell him at once, said Gordon firmly. Is it me speak to the Fat Controller? It's forward he'd think me, and maybe interfering. Well, here he is, said a cheerful voice. Now what's this all about? Duck broke the awkward silence. Beg pardon, sir, but we do need another engine. I agree, Duck. That is why I'm giving 7101 another chance. Their faces showed such dismay that the Fat Controller had difficulty with his own. Sir, ventured Gordon at last, we had hoped for a real engine. They, the Fat Controller said gravely, are rare, and unless one escapes, there's little hope. But sir, burst out Donald, one has! And thanks to Douglas, is now at our works, announced the Fat Controller. Sir, gasped Douglas, is there anything you don't know? More than you think, he laughed. Oliver's crew told me all you did, Douglas. Oh, sir, you couldn't be a Broadway engine and them trouble, and they'll do a wheel's turn. More than a wheel's turn, I fancy, Douglas. I'm pleased with you. Oliver, Isabel, and Toad will soon be ours. Oliver and Isabel are just what we need for Duck's branch line. Loud cheers greeted this announcement. And Toad wants to be your brake fan, Douglas. Thank you, sir. I'd hoped for that. He and I will do great together. That, of course, made everything right. Henry spoke a good word for 7101, and the others gave him a welcome. He had good manners for a start, so Henry didn't find it hard to teach him our ways. 7101 finds them different from those on the other railway, but much more interesting. He is now quite a useful engine. They teased him at first because of his growls. They said he was like a bear. He still growls, but not because he's cross, but because he can't help it. His name, Bear, has stuck. He likes it. It's nicer than just a number, he says. Having a name means that you really belong. The Fat Controller soon had Oliver, Isabel, and Toad mended and painted in full green Western colors. Then he rescued 3 more Western auto coaches. 2, Alice and Mirabelle, he gave to Duck. The 3rd, Dulcie, joined Oliver and Isabel. Duck and Oliver are happy on their branch line. It runs along the coast to the small railway. We reopen branch lines, they boast. They are very proud of this indeed. The others laughed at first and called their branch the Little Weston. Duck and Oliver were delighted, and now no one ever thinks of calling it anything else.
Gordon was resting in a siding. Sometimes, he thought, it's really tiring to be such a large and splendid engine. One does have to keep up appearances so. Beep, 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 beep. Hello, fat face, whistled Henry. What cheeks, spluttered Gordon. That Henry is too big for his wheels. Fancy speaking to me like that. Me, who has never had an accident. Aren't jammed whistles and burst safety valves accidents? Asked Percy innocently. No, indeed. High spirits might happen to any engine. But to come off the rails like Henry did, well, I ask you, is it right? Is it decent? Then it was Henry's turn to take the express. Gordon watched him getting ready. Be careful, Henry. You're not pulling the flying kipper now. Mind you keep on the rails today. Henry went off in a huff, and Gordon yawned and went to sleep. But not for long. Wake up, Gordon, said his driver. A special train's coming, and where to pull it? Is it coaches or trucks? Trucks, said his driver. Trucks, said Gordon. Puh! Gordon's fire was slow to start, so Edward had to push Gordon to the turntable to get him facing the right way. I won't go, grumbled Gordon. Don't be silly, puffed Edward. At last Gordon was on the turntable. The movement had shaken his fire. It was now burning nicely and making steam. Gordon was cross and didn't care what he did. He waited till the table was halfway round. I'll show them, he hissed. He moved slowly forward to jam the table, but he couldn't stop himself and slithered into a ditch. Ooh, she hissed. Get me out! Get me out! Not a hope, said his driver and fireman. You're stuck, you silly great engine. Don't you understand that? They telephoned the Fat Controller. So Gordon didn't want to take the special train and ran into a ditch. What's that you say? The special's waiting. Tell Edward to take it, please. And Gordon? Oh, leave him where he is. We haven't time to bother with him now. On the other side of the ditch, some little boys were chattering. Coo, doesn't he look silly? They'll never get him out. They began to sing. Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch. Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, all on a Monday morning. Gordon lay in the ditch all day. Oh dear, he thought, I shall never get out. But that evening they lifted Gordon and made a road of sleepers under his wheels to keep him from the mud. Strong ropes were fastened to his back end, and James and Henry, pulling hard, managed to bring him to safety. Late that night, Gordon crawled home, a sadder and wiser engine.
Nancy is a guard's daughter. One day she was working on Skarloey with some polish and a rag. Skarloey was snoozing happily, but Nancy wanted to talk. "Wake up, lazy bones! Your brass is filthy. Aren't you ashamed?" "No," yawned Skarloey. "You're just an old fusspot." And Skarloey closed his eyes. He was thinking about his friend Rheneas and all the good times they had shared together before Rheneas went away to be mended. Nancy interrupted again. "Don't you want to look nice for when Rheneas comes home?" Skarloey wasn't sleepy anymore. "What? When?" "Soon, Daddy told me. I'm going now," she said. "Nancy, stop! Do I really look nice? Please, polish me again." "Now who's an old fusspot?" laughed Nancy, and set to work once more. Duncan was jealous. "Aren't you going to polish me too?" "Sorry, not today. I'm going now. I'm helping the refreshment lady this afternoon." "We must get the ices ready for the passengers." "Never mind, Duncan," she said. But Duncan did mind. "It isn't fair," he complained. "Peter Sam gets a special funnel, Sir Handel gets special wheels, passengers get ices, but I'm not even polished." Of course, this wasn't true, but Duncan enjoyed complaining. He became sulkier still. That afternoon, there was bad news from up the line. "One of Skarloey's coaches has come off the rails," called Duncan's driver. "We'll have to take the workmen there right away." "All this extra work," grumbled Duncan. "It wears an engine out. Rubbish. Come on." The derailed coach was in the middle of Skarloey's train, so he had gone on to the top station with his front coaches. Duncan shunted the works train into the sidings and left the workmen to sort out the mess. Then he brought the passengers and the rear coaches home. He sulked all the way. "I get no rest, I get no rest," he muttered. Duncan made the journey very difficult. He was short of steam, so his driver waited a while in the hope of raising more. But Duncan wouldn't try. "We'll keep our passengers waiting," said his driver. Duncan was cross. "You always think about the passengers and never about me." It wasn't long before Duncan built up enough steam to set off again. But he was still very grumpy and cross. "I'm overworked and I won't stand it." At last they reached the viaduct near the station. "Come on, Duncan," cajoled his driver. "One more effort and you'll have a rest and a drink at the station." Then Duncan was very rude. "Keep your old station. I'm staying here." And he did too. Skarloey had to haul Duncan and his train all the way to the platform. The passengers were furious. They told everyone what a bad railway it was. That night, the fat controller spoke to Duncan. "No passengers means no polish." "No polish means no passengers," Duncan muttered to himself. He still has a lot to learn, doesn't he? Duncan would not stop grumbling. He grumbled that he wasn't polished enough. He grumbled that he was overworked. Most of all, he grumbled about the passengers. "I'm ashamed of you, Duncan," said Skarloey. "Thank goodness Rheneas is coming home soon. Perhaps he'll teach you some sense before it's too late." "What has Rheneas to do with me?" Reneus saved our railway, replied Skarloey. Please tell us about it, said Peter Sam. Well, began Skarloey, it was before you came here. Things were bad. Reneus and I had to keep the trains running, or our railway would have to close. How awful, murmured Peter Sam. I tried hard, continued Skarloey, but my old wheels ached. Reneus understood. It's my turn now, he'd tell me. He was often short of steam, but he always struggled to a station and rested there. I mustn't stop between stations, he'd say. The passengers wouldn't like it. Sure, huffed Duncan. He had stopped on a viaduct and hadn't cared at all. Passengers, continued Skarloey, get cross if you stop at the wrong places. Reneus stopped in a wrong place once, and this is what happened. One wet and windy afternoon when the rails were damp, Reneus was travelling home with a full train. There were even passengers in the guard's van. It wasn't a comfortable ride at all. Reneus's wheels kept slipping, and it was a steep climb. At last, his wheels gripped the rails again. The worst is over, he thought. Now we're away. But they weren't. Ah! I've got cramp, he groaned. And Reneus stopped on the loneliest part of the line. His driver examined him carefully. Your valve gear has jammed. We need to reach the next station. Do you think you can still get us there? I'll try, replied Reneus. Reneus did his best. If I fail, he thought to himself, the passengers will be cross and the railway will close. Everything blurred. He was really too tired to make another turn of his wheels. But he did. And another, and another, and another. Finally, tired but triumphant, Reneus reached the station. I'm here at last, he wheezed. Thank you for getting us home, said the passengers. We'll tell all our friends what a fine railway this is. His driver was delighted. You're a gallant little engine, he said to Reneus. When you're rested, we'll mend you so you'll be ready for tomorrow. And, smiled Skarloey, Reneus was always ready for tomorrow. Thank you for telling us about him, whispered Duncan. I was wrong. Passengers are important after all. The next day, Reneus came home. All the engines were there to greet him. Edward pushed his truck to the siding where he was lifted onto his rails. This was the signal for a chorus of whistles from engines large and small. Everyone was happy, and Reneus was the happiest of all. You know, he whispered to Skarloey, this helps a little engine to feel that at last he has really come home. One day, Percy arrived at the quarry to collect some stone for his trucks. Snow and frost lay everywhere. There was not a sound to be heard. Percy ventured further. He found Mavis, the new diesel engine, resting in the shelter of some rocks. Cheer up, Mavis, he whistled. Mavis was still remembering the trouble she'd had with trucks. Manager says I don't listen to advice. He says I've no business jauntering down Toby's line. Toby's a fusspot. Toby has forgotten more about trucks than you will ever know, replied Percy. You must put the trucks where he wants them. Then you'll be a really useful engine. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to take these stones to the harbour. Mavis liked Percy, but she still wouldn't listen to his advice. Why shouldn't I go on Toby's line? The siding arrangements were awkward. To put the trucks where Toby wanted them, Mavis had to make several journeys. She started making a plan. If we used the teeniest bit of Toby's line, we would save all this bother. Her driver, suspecting nothing, allowed them to go as far as the first level crossing. A few days later, the weather changed. As the snow melted, the quarry grew busy again. Some trains were so long that Mavis had to go beyond the level crossing. Now for her plan. She would go further down the line without it seeming her fault. "Can you keep a secret?" she asked the trucks. "Yes, yes, yes," they chattered. "Will you bump me at the level crossing and tell no one I asked you?" The trucks promised. But whilst Mavis was away, Toby arrived. He decided to shunt the trucks himself. The trucks decided to bump him anyway. They reached the level crossing and Toby's brakes came on. This was the signal for the trucks. "On, on!" they yelled. Toby was away with the trucks screaming and yelling behind him. No one realized that melted snow had turned a stream into a torrent and the bridge above it was about to collapse. The rails were now like a tightrope across the thundering water. "Stop! Stop!" cried Toby. His driver fought for control. They came nearer and nearer to the bridge. The driver braked hard. Toby stopped, still on the rails, but with his wheels treading the tightrope over the abyss. Mavis was horrified and quickly came to the rescue. Workmen anchored Toby with chains while she pulled the trucks away. Then she helped Toby to safety. "I'm sorry about the trucks," said Mavis. "I can't think how you managed to stop them in time." "Oh, well," said Toby, "my driver told me about circus people who walk tightropes, but I just didn't fancy doing it myself." Later, the Fat Controller arrived. "A very smart piece of work," he said. "Mavis, you did well too, I hear." It was my fault about those trucks, sir," she faltered. "But if I could..." "Could what?" "Come down the line sometimes, sir. Toby says he'll show me what to do." "Certainly," replied the Fat Controller, "if your manager agrees." And so it was arranged. Now Mavis is as happy as can be, and the Fat Controller thinks she's really useful indeed.
Percy puffed grumpily into the yards. He was feeling put upon and said so. "I feel put upon," he complained to Thomas. Thomas was confused. "Put upon what? The rails?" "No, put upon with work. Driver says he is too." "Put upon? What a silly saying," replied Thomas. But Annie and Clarabelle liked it, and they sang about it too. "Percy's been put upon, put upon, put upon. Percy's been put upon, poor old Percy." Percy is being put upon. I am. He collected metal from the foundry, coal from the yards, flour from the mills, rock from the quarries, and fuel from the depot. Then he delivered it all to the docks. Next, he collected some empty freight cars. "Who's this dirty little engine?" cried the freight cars. "We want Thomas or Duck." Percy ignored them. Put upon, that's what I am. That night, all the engines laughed at him. "We can see what's been put upon you," said Thomas. "Silence," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Percy, you've done a good day's work. Now get a good night's rest." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Next morning, he took some freight cars to the coal yards. Then he had to push empty freight cars to the mine shaft. When he arrived, there was trouble. The foreman spoke to his driver. "The freight cars are stuck on the mechanism. All they need is a good push. We'll do it right away." Percy shunted back to where a large canvas barrier was used to protect his line from loose rocks. Percy charged at the line of freight cars too fast and too hard. "Oh no!" gasped Percy. The freight cars broke free, but ran out of control to the mines below. On! Faster, faster!" the silly freight cars yelled. Then there was trouble again. "Get out of here fast! The mine's collapsing!" "We'll just have to make a run for it, Percy," called his driver. "There's going to be an avalanche," wailed Percy. And he was right. Worse still, the track he was on began to crumble. "Oh, help!" wailed Percy. Then he remembered something he had seen earlier. "There's a canvas barrier by the track. That might save us." They were just in time. Percy was right. The canvas did indeed save them, but the miners didn't know that. "The avalanche has buried an engine and its crew," shouted the foreman. "We must help them." When Percy had been rescued, Sir Topham Hatt spoke to his driver and fireman, then to Percy. "Driver told me how brave you were, Percy. As a reward, you will be repainted at the works." "Oh, thank you, sir." When he returned, Percy's coat glistened in the sun. "I'm sorry we teased you, Percy," said Thomas. "You were certainly put upon by that avalanche." "Yes, indeed. But just look at my new coat of paint. Now, I don't mind that being put upon me."
One evening, James puffed into the shed and began grumbling to the other engines.
"I'm exhausted. Umpteen passenger trains and one too many goods runs. Thank goodness I'm helping on Edward's branch line tomorrow. I could do with a rest."
"Rest?" scoffed Duck.
"Rest? Branch lines are hard work, James. We work just as hard as any mainline engine. Sometimes even harder." "Pah! Can't be that hard, Duck. Oh, you wait and see tomorrow."
The next morning, James arrived at Edward Station, ready to start work on the branch line.
"I'll need you to shunt the yard whilst I take my first passenger train,"
Edward explained.
"Be mindful though, the yard can get very busy." "A bit of light shunting doesn't bother me,"
huffed James.
"It's more than light shunting, James. There's trucks of scrap metal to go to the scrapyard, some oil tankers which need to be sent to the big station, and the empty trucks to go back to the docks." And that's before Donald arrives with the new trucks for the China Clayworks later.
James was aghast.
I can't do all that. Isn't there a tank engine who can...
No, Edward interrupted. It's all part of running your own branch line. Edward puffed away to find his coaches and left James to shunt the yard. When Edward is shunting, he treats the trucks fairly and doesn't bump them unless they misbehave. In return, they are obedient and give him no trouble. But James bumped and banged them all around the yard. He thought he was being firm, when really he was only aggravating them. Gordon laughed when he pulled in with the express.
Oh, look, he teased. It's a new tank engine. Oh, I'm sorry, James. I didn't realise it was you. It's not funny, he whinged. I'm gonna have to do all the shunting on my own. You don't know the route of the line like Boko and I do, Edward sternly reminded him. You can familiarise yourself with it by taking the new trucks to the harbour. James let off steam furiously. First shunting, now a goods train.
Soon, Donald arrived with the brand new trucks from the mainland. You could see how rough James was being with the trucks.
You know how spiteful trucks can be, James. They'll pay you out if you're not careful. They won't get the better of me. Can't allow that,
the new trucks said to one another.
He won't push us around. We'll show him.
Later that day, James took the new trucks along the branch line to the harbour. Next morning, Bill and Ben brought the loaded trucks back to the harbour yard. They were still determined to pay James out and waited keenly for him on the quayside. But they were surprised to find their plans scuppered when they saw Edward backing down toward them.
What do we do now?
They twittered to one another.
One engine is as good as another,
said the front truck.
If we show him what we're capable of, then we'll show the red one too.
Edward had grown tired of James's complaints and decided instead to do the goods work himself. The rain had made the rails slippery, and Edward was having to take care to maintain grip. The trucks noticed he was slipping a little and began their tricks. Edward had expected this to happen. They were visitors, and so wouldn't be used to him.
Come along now,
he called.
No nonsense. That's what you think,
giggled the trucks.
On!
The trucks bumped him hard and Edward surged forward. The driver put on the brakes hard to slow them down, but they were no use against the heavy trucks. Edward was beginning to fret. He knew that the junction wasn't far away, and if he didn't slow down sufficiently by then, there could be a serious accident. Then he had an idea.
I know how we can stop them,
he called to the driver.
Slow me right down for the hill. We'll be able to control them from there, with all the weight behind me.
The driver agreed. Gently braking, Edward quickly regained control of the trucks again as they climbed the hill. tried hard to keep up their momentum, but Edward was having none of it. "Well done, you clever old engine," called his driver. "You've saved the day." Edward ran smoothly back into the station, where Donald was waiting for him. "I would have thought after all the trouble James was giving those trucks yesterday they were up to no good. All you need is a bit of patience and a bit of experience to handle trucks, Donald. An engine like you should know that." James felt ashamed of himself, and later apologised to Edward. "I'm sorry those trucks caused you bother, Edward. I shouldn't have been so rough with them before." "Just be glad it was me who was pulling them today, not you," said Edward firmly. "I hope it will teach you to be more careful and a lot more respectful towards trucks in future, James. A little respect goes a long way. That's why I don't have any trouble with them." "I'll remember that in future," James sighed meekly. "I only hope I can handle a runaway train half as well as you. You were splendid." "Well, when it comes to trucks, I suppose somewhere along the line you do need a bit of experience," smiled the old engine. "There's one thing I'll advise you about handling trucks properly." "What's that?" "Know your route properly," chuckled Edward. "It might be your only hope of saving the day."